Hello, my name is Joe Brennan, and I ship Reylo. Now, depending on what audience this reaches, that statement could be interpreted in a vast number of different ways, or it could just sound like gibberish. So to get to the heart of what I mean, let's go back to the start. Let's start by talking about shipping in general. It's defined as support or a particular interest in a romantic pairing between two characters in a fictional series. Often when this relationship is one portrayed by fans rather than depicted in the series itself. It's been around for far longer than it's had this name. As long as there have been stories about characters, there have been people wanting these characters to get together, and Star Wars is no exception. Romance has always been a part of these films, and fans have been engaged with these ships since the very beginning. The original trilogy had two potential couples, which then very hastily became one. You rarely find people who still ship Luke and Leia, with the possible exception of J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. The love story element was brought right into the forefront of the prequel trilogy, driving a lot of the narrative, and this was reflected in the fandom. There was so much fan art and fan fiction about Anakin and Padme on the internet in the early 2000s. It's fair to say that people love love. But I think since buying Lucasfilm, Disney has seemed afraid to fully embrace the romantic side of Star Wars that has always been there. Either through fear of being accused of Disneyfying this franchise that's meant for boys, or because these boys have grown up to take control of the series, and they don't want any icky kissing and cuddling in their Star Wars, thank you very much. Romance is undoubtedly less prominent in the sequel trilogy than the other two, but that's not to say that it's completely devoid of romantic pairings. The most prominent ship is the one that pairs Rey with Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo. The couple name is Reylo, and it's had a long and complicated history that's crammed a lot of controversial twists and turns into the last 6 years, both on screen and off. I'm going to take a look back at all the films that have dealt with this romance and all the endless discourse that's happened afterwards, because I think Reylo is pretty great, and I'd like to dive into why. It makes sense to go in order and start at the very beginning, partially because I often see this absurd notion that the kiss at the end of The Rise of Skywalker came out of nowhere, and I want to remind you that it absolutely did not. The Reylo fandom has existed since the very beginning, since the first movie to feature them came out. In The Force Awakens, the two don't share a huge amount of screen time, but I rewatched the movie to remind myself of the moments they do share. They don't properly meet until the 1 hour 20 minute mark, but Rey does see him in a dream, and we see the moment where Kylo Ren first hears of her, and he does seem pretty intrigued.
The two were accompanied by a girl.
What girl?
When they do meet in person, they don't get off to the best start. He freezes her in place and demands the location of BB-8, before changing his mind and deciding that she's the only thing he needs. Oi oi, maybe a bit of foreshadowing there? Speaking of foreshadowing, we get an interesting line from Maz. She tells Rey that the belonging she seeks is not behind her, it's ahead. That whoever she's waiting for on Jakku is never coming back, but there's someone who still could. She doesn't say who, but Rey and the audience assume she means Luke, and she very well may. But you know which other character in this movie is spoken about as someone who might come back? Benjamin Chewbacca Solo. Maz is very wise. She may know that Rey won't find a sense of belonging with Luke Skywalker, and she'll actually end up bringing home the lost son of Han Solo and Leia Organa. But maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. In the forest of Takodana, Ben scoops Rey up in a bridal carry and brings her to his ship, in what was quite possibly the founding moment for a very different type of ship. My man could have got the stormtroopers to do it, but nah, he wanted to do it like this. The next time we see them is the interrogation scene, which immediately has a very different dynamic to when he questioned Poe Dameron at the start of the film. Rey gives as good as she gets in the Battle of Words, and then the Battle of the Force. When she calls her captor a creature in a mask, he immediately removes it, displaying the human face of Ben Solo for the first time. In the director's commentary, JJ says that we expect to see a face like Vader's, scarred and damaged, but when the mask comes off, he looks like a sort of prince, and it's surprising and confusing. We see that he doesn't need it, that he wears it because he wants to look more menacing and threatening, and doesn't think he can rely on his face to do that. It's really an immediate display of vulnerable insecurity, and the dynamic between him and Rey changes in a moment. Initially in the film, he had his mask off when he was speaking to Snoke and to Vader's helmet, but they changed it so the scene with Rey was the first. As much as I love Adam Driver's face, this was absolutely the right call. Not just for the delayed reveal, but because there's something fascinating about his supposed enemy being the first person he lets his guard down for. He's not himself in front of his grandfather or his master, but when he's in front of this girl, he is. As he reads Rey's mind, he explains the memories he sees, the loneliness, the sleepless nights. You do wonder if his ability to sense these things about her is heightened by the fact they probably share very similar experiences. I can't help in Kylo Ren. Their minds bridge right then and there. She senses his weakness, his fear. She's driven by anger but uncovers a side of him that very few have seen, and they are clearly a match for one another power-wise. He has to go and see Snoke for guidance, which gives Rey a chance to leave, and he's pretty upset about that. Then they go a bit longer without seeing each other. Ben goes through some stuff with his dad, ends up killing him, but very politely.
Thank you.
But for some reason, Rey doesn't really appreciate it. In fact, she's quite cross about the whole thing. She calls him a monster, he throws her against a tree, it's a bit messy, ends in a big old fight. But there aren't many hard feelings from Mr. Kylo Ren. In fact, mid-fight he offers to teach her the ways of the Force. She doesn't agree to it, and they fight until they're split up, and that's the last we see of them in this movie. Now, I don't think there are many hints of romance in this movie, but Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver have a remarkable chemistry. Any scene they share together is undeniably intense and electric. They were the obvious pick for shippers, with the bridal carry and the framing of that interrogation. I think people were ready for another Star Wars star-crossed romance, especially one between a gorgeous space prince and a badass scavenger. Something that is almost as important and relevant to Reylo as the movie content is everything surrounding it. The discourse has been complicated and intense for as long as it's been a thing, and as I said, it's been a thing for as long as these characters have. Reylo took the world and the internet by storm very quickly. By March 2016, there were articles talking about this hot new ship and how it was absolutely dominating fan art and fan fiction. This official Star Wars Celebration poster added fuel to the fire for obvious reasons. And I have to give these fanfiction writers credit because so many of them correctly saw where this pairing was going. There were predictions about Rey seeking comfort from Ben when her relationship with Luke was strained. There was this collective understanding that the two characters' minds were connected in the Force, and they'd be able to speak to each other and do other things with each other over long distances through the Force. It was a fanfiction trope years before it actually became canon. I can't imagine the excitement that these fans felt when they watched The Last Jedi and saw that the stuff they wrote about was actually happening on screen. Well, maybe not everything they'd written about. But just as people were in love with this pairing from the start, there were also those critical of the ship and the shippers. I'll speak in more depth about the major criticisms after I've spoken about all three films, but the one I want to briefly touch on now is the idea that the pairing is an example of an abusive relationship. Because they physically fight, he invades her mind, and they start out incredibly hostile with one another. But from the way I'm looking at it, it's an enemies to lovers ship, so they kind of have to start out by behaving like enemies. If they didn't, it would just be called lovers. They're not rivals or bickering friends, they are enemies. You get people saying, oh, I'm all for enemies to lovers, but I draw the line at them fighting. And it's just as ridiculous as the people saying, oh, you know, I love redemption stories, as long as the person being redeemed has never done anything mean. And sure, if we want to apply strict, real-world parallels, then yeah, it's bad that they physically fought. But it's not the real world. Rian Johnson makes a whole point of this. The events of these movies are heightened, they reflect our experiences in exaggerated ways, rather than representing them 100% accurately. If this wasn't the case, then the original trilogy is harmful because it shows a father physically wounding his son, and then the son continues to believe that there's good in him and tries to fix him. It also means that Padme's final reassurance that there is still good in Anakin isn't about hope or love or redemption, it's just an irresponsible portrayal of a relationship. If it was the real world, they both should have turned their backs on Anakin Skywalker, but we understand as an audience that it isn't, and they shouldn't, and they don't. Han, Leia, Luke, they don't turn their backs on Ben Solo. Some people thought The Force Awakens was about Ben Solo solidifying his evilness, that him killing Han sent him properly over to the dark side, and he was now irredeemable, and it was too late to do anything for him. But that goes against everything we're told by Han and Leia, who talk about how it's not too late to bring him home, not to mention going against what his grandmother Padme believed in. So no, the fact he was a villain in this film doesn't disqualify him from being a hero later on, or even falling in love. There are some people who have said that the interactions and dynamic between Rey and Kylo Ren remind them of traumatic events in their own life, and they can't get behind the pairing because of that. And that is absolutely fine. Those feelings are valid, and to say otherwise would be cruel and dismissive. But I also don't think it should mean that other people aren't allowed to find joy in it. I don't think this is going to lead to an abuse epidemic from people who base their relationships on Star Wars. Reylo shippers are intelligent enough to distinguish fiction and reality. Arguably, they do it a lot better than other types of fan, but we'll get onto that later. For now, let's move on from The Force Awakens aftermath to The Last Jedi beforemath, if that's a word. You know what I mean. By 2017, everyone knew what Reylo was, even Judi Dench.
What's the deal with Reylo?
The arguments continued to escalate in aggression but stagnate in talking points as there was no new content, and I don't think the general public were sold on Reylo after just episode 7, but that was about to change. When the first full trailer for The Last Jedi came out, it immediately solidified the connection between Rey and Kylo Ren. Snoke narrates over footage of his apprentice, Luke over footage of his. Then Luke directly compares Rey to Ben. Rey says she needs someone to show her place in all of this, and then boom, one of the greatest trailer plot twists of all time. My mind was racing, suddenly imagining Rey Rey and Kylo Ren working together. It was a very exciting concept, and again, I can only imagine how exciting it was for the people who had been hoping this would happen for 2 years. I, like a lot of people, hopped on the Reylo train when this trailer and the movie came out. I personally think it's hard not to, and that a lot of people had already made up their minds on this potential romance before they'd actually seen it unfold, because the way it unfolds in this movie is superb and beautiful. Let's remind ourselves of the moments they share in episode 8. God, I feel like I'm hosting a clip show, but this format works, right? The first time we see Rey, she's very much of the opinion that Kylo Ren is a baddie, and that's probably understandable. She tells Luke that there's no light left in him, but to be honest, I'm not sure she's given it much thought. She says it as part of her prepared, rehearsed spiel that she gives Luke to try and convince him to come and fight for the Resistance. It's all done in a monotone that got Daisy Ridley a lot of criticism from people who are really stupid in the head, because if you pay attention, she's clearly concealing all her real feelings from Luke with a forced detachment, which we find out later on when he breaks that facade down and she tells him what's really going on with her. We don't see her true emotional reaction to Kylo Ren until they meet, through that forced connection that only the Reylos saw coming. Just in case anyone misconstrues this, Rian Johnson didn't copy any fanfiction when writing The Last Jedi. He wrote it before The Force Awakens even came out. It was just a really great prediction of the natural progression of these characters. Rian says that the whole reason of the Bond's existence is to force these two characters to talk, noting that if they were together in person, they'd have another physical confrontation, whereas this connection gives them no choice but to actually speak to one another. The framing isn't flashy or impressive, it's just the two of them facing each other as if they were in the same room. As soon as they make eye contact, we get it. A little note on that, destroying Kylo Ren's helmet was a genius move, as it really lets us see into the soul of Ben Solo, especially in these scenes. The focus is on the intimacy of their conversations, pushed even further by the fact that their voices are the only things we can hear, raw and exposed. There's a bit of an echo to signify their distance, but that's it. Rian Johnson said they're two halves of the protagonist, and immediately here that is obvious. The warm sunlight on Rey's face is mirrored by the harsh medical light on Kylo's. She's surrounded by nature, life. He's surrounded by technology and droids. And this contrast between the two extends to their attitudes in this scene. When Rey sees Kylo Ren, she tries to shoot him, full of rage for the killing of Han Solo. But he's just fascinated about why the Force has connected them. And again, it's interesting to see how willing he is to talk to her. He's more conflicted than ever in this film. The resolve he expected to find in killing his father only tore him apart further, and he's unable to do the same to his mother. He has violent outbursts at Snoke and at an innocent elevator, but with Rey he brings this calmness, this softness, which is contrasted by the anger of the hero.
Can you see my surroundings?
You're gonna pay for what you did.
I can't see yours.
This interaction is interrupted, but the same vibes are brought to the second meeting. Again, they match each other with the shadow on one side of their face and light on the other. The mismatch of energies kind of forces Rey to come down from her shoutiness and match his calm, although she's still quite aggressive. He says she has the same look in her eyes from the forest when she called him a monster, and it sounds to me like someone got their feelings hurt.
And you called me a monster.
You are a monster.
I want you to stop being mean to me and be nice.
After a night of online dating, they have to go back to class. Luke's lesson makes me think of Kylo and Rey for a number of reasons. He talks about balance, powerful light, powerful darkness. Rey reminds Luke that he was able to see conflict in the most hated man in the galaxy, that he believed Anakin Skywalker wasn't gone and that Vader could be turned. I don't know whether she knows she's also talking about Kylo Ren, but I think her unconscious mind definitely went there. We also get Luke's version of the night Ben Solo fell, a blatant example of rewriting history to make the bad guys look like the good. It's really no wonder Mark Hamill had no issue in saying it. In the next connection scene, not only do we see Ben Solo's face, we see his boobs. And for the first time, the two of them actually kind of talk. Rey and Kylo Ren, that is, not the boobs. Rey is still angry about Ben killing Han, but she seems to genuinely want to know why. She wants to understand. He goes on to give his side of Luke's story, and she calls him a liar, but she knows it's true. The interaction pushes her to go into the dark side cave, where she has a vision. The scene is accompanied by narration, with Rey recalling how she felt, and we're like, huh? Narration in Star Wars? But then it shows she's in the hut, telling the story after the fact, opening up about how alone she felt. And then they drop the bombshell, something I'm sure most people saw coming but caught me off guard in the cinema. She's not telling Luke Skywalker, she's telling Ben Solo. We hear his voice, reassuring her that she's not alone. Gone is the echo from their voices, and it's now just as if they're in the same room, sat opposite each other. She tells him he's not alone either, and once again reminds him and the audience that it's not too late for him to come back. Then we get the big moment. In a movie with holdo maneuvers, throne room fights, and the death death of Luke Skywalker, the moment that stuck with me the most was this hand touch, this candlelit moment of intimacy. They cross a boundary and do something we've never seen before. They make physical contact through the Force, and it's not to fight, it's to hold hands. Watching the moment they touch, you can almost feel it. You hear Rey's heavy breathing hitching as the connection is made. It's so slow and intense and powerful, especially when you consider that neither of them would have had that kind of physical connection with another person before. There is no moment in Star Wars like it. I'd love to see where this interaction would have gone if Luke hadn't interrupted, but he does. And Rey immediately confronts him about what he did to Ben. And it's not just shouting, she attacks him. She attacks Luke Skywalker, the Jedi she's been looking for and desperately seeking approval from, with her staff, and then with her lightsaber. She's hashtag Team Ben from that moment on. She says that when they touched, she saw his future, and that it's not too late for him to be turned, which she actually already said before touching hands, so it must be true. But the new information is that she saw them fighting together and says it's how they'll win, and she's right, just a bit premature. Without the help of Luke, Rey says that Ben is their last hope. Obviously, she's forgetting that she exists, but to see Ben Solo framed as this last hope, a phrase that's been used to describe heroes of the past like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, and Leia Organa, is very interesting. Rey is certain there is absolutely no conflict in her as she leaves Ahch-To. Also, she clearly ships Reylo because she ships herself off to Old Man Snoke's boudoir to meet her long-distance space boyfriend. There's that bit of awkwardness that comes from seeing the guy she's been e-dating in person, but that fades very fast. By the time they're in the elevator, they are getting pretty close. Her clothing has gone from the pale white robes to the much darker Jedi look, and her hair is down. She looks more mature, more sure of herself. The two are visually brought closer together. Ben says he saw Rey's parents when he touched her hand. Obviously, he missed out quite a key detail, but that's because JJ hadn't retconned it yet. Let's just say he mistook the word Palpatine for palpable, and he can be forgiven because, goddamn, the tension in the hut was exactly that. When they get to Snoke, he continues that idea of a power balance.
Darkness rises and light to meet it.
He says he knew Ben's equal in the Force would rise for the light side, and just like the audience, he assumed Luke Skywalker, but obviously it was in fact Rey. This was all the explanation of Rey's immense power that I ever needed, but I guess it didn't satisfy stupid people. But that's not what this video is about. It's about their connection, which Snoke takes credit for. He says he knew Ben's conflict would be enough to convince Rey to come to him, so he bridged their minds. Now, whether this is true is partially down to your own interpretation, and I can't quite make up my mind. I like the idea that he did do it because of what it means for his death. The fact he created the power couple that led to his downfall because, as Rey said, he underestimated them both. But he could also just be rolling with something that the Force did on its own, trying to convince the pair that anything they do together is within his plan, give them a feeling of hopelessness. I think I prefer this idea, maybe, that the Force connected them because they're equals, because they're meant to be together, but I don't know. Let me know how you interpret it. Snoke's supposed all-knowingness can definitely be called into question after he narrates his own murder. He points out that his apprentice lacks all the conflict he used to. He is 100% sure of what he has to do and knows that he has the strength to do it. For the first time, we see a look on Ben's face of sheer determined focus, but it's not what Snoke hoped for. Snoke couldn't fathom the idea that the strength he was showing was for saving Rey instead of killing her, and killing his master instead. He killed the man who abused him, manipulated him and his power from a young age, but the first time in his life that he's been strong enough to stand up to him is when it's about saving Rey instead of himself. It's Rey who gives Ben the strength to take control of his own destiny. Without a word spoken between him and Rey, he kills Snoke, pulls the lightsaber into her hand, they stand back to back and give us the most beautiful display of Force-sensitive teamwork we've ever seen. It's just so cool. If you want, you can go frame by frame and go, actually, you can see all the continuity errors and logical inconsistencies, but if you're not a fucking loser, you can see this for what it is. An absolutely incredible action moment where two people are completely in sync with one another. I just love it. When they win, Rey is sure Ben is on her side completely, and then comes the tragedy. He's still so uncertain about his place in the galaxy, and it breaks her heart. And he gets angry that she doesn't see things the same way he does. It's not the typical join me and together we'll rule the galaxy speech. It's another emotional display of vulnerability. He wants Rey at his side. He needs Rey at his side. It's only with her that he's sure of anything. In all three films, Adam Driver never misses a beat with his performance. It's incredible. But I think his pleas to Rey may just be his best line delivery. That's something you never heard Vader say, nor Dooku, not even Anakin, but Kylo Ren, he says his pleases and thank yous. He uses the revelation that her parents were nobody as a way of convincing her to let them forge a new destiny, free from the burdens of lineage. Then there's the yikes moment, the line, "You're nothing but not to me." It's always shown as an example of Kylo Ren being a manipulative abuser. It's not a great thing to say, although he's not saying she's worthless. His words are specifically relating to her place in the story. Is it still negging? Yeah, but I don't think that means it's an abusive relationship, because at this point, it's not a relationship. She doesn't stick around, she doesn't perpetuate the harmful "I can fix him" idea. When Ben Solo starts acting like Kylo Ren, she refuses to take his hand. She tries to fight him, and when the lightsaber explosion buys her time, she leaves. The lightsaber being pulled in both directions equally is such a good visual. It says so much. I can see why JJ stole it for the Rise of Skywalker, and it being destroyed is a great way of showing what this pairing means, an end to old institutions, and a reminder that lineage and legacy are not the most important things in this movie. It was definitely the right choice for Rey to leave him in that moment, because Kylo Ren was all sorts of conflicted after killing Snoke. He unfortunately doubles down on being a silly sausage, goes hard into the whole kill the past mentality, and becomes supreme leader. By the end of the movie, he has stepped into that villain role a bit more concretely, but we know that there's more to him than that, because Rey knows there's more to him than that. They're enemies by the time they get to Crate. Rey and Leia will keep fighting him for as long as he chooses to be the bad guy, but that's not the same thing as giving up on him. Luke tells his sister that he can't save her son. She says she knows he's gone, and he says,
"No one's ever really gone."
You'd think these things contradict each other, but they don't. Luke says he can't save Ben, but that doesn't mean Ben can't be saved. Just like The Force Awakens, I am baffled by the number of people who see the end of The Last Jedi as the point of no return for the character, when everyone in the movie is saying it's not too late. The same way people saw the last Reylo Force connection scene as the end of their bond. To me, it's just that Kylo Ren is clearly not currently in a position to be joined, and this is Rey closing the door on that idea for now. Although this movie clearly develops and showcases an intense dynamic between these two, there were still questions about whether that should be read as romantic. Ryan speaks about having to transition Kylo Ren in the eyes of the audience from someone we hate because he killed Han Solo to someone we could plausibly get behind the redemption of, and he said Rey was how to put that on screen. She comes into the movie with the same attitude we did, and eventually, as Ryan puts it, she sees this opportunity in him, and maybe sees something more than that in him. So through Rey, we are brought closer to this character, given a better understanding of who he is, who he was, and who he can be. So that's a bit ambiguous. Her feelings for him could just be the compassion of a Jedi, or even strategy from someone who knows they'll likely win the war if Ben Solo joins them. But I don't know. That phrase, something more, that Ryan uses is interesting. He's spoken a lot about what he calls their primal connection, as has Daisy Ridley, who says this about them.
It's only when they touch that either of them actually see what could be, and through that they build this kind of incredible intimacy.
And when Ryan was speaking about why he chose to center so much of the film on personal character moments, he said this.
I feel like it's always more satisfying if you can get a satisfying beat out of the intimate. And maybe that's why the ultimate expression of that is just focusing on even tighter on just contact. And that, to me, that's one of my favorite shots in the movie, just those two fingers touching. It's the closest thing we'll get to a sex scene in a Star Wars movie, probably.
And he's not the only person to call it that. Mark Hamill used the exact same words.
The big sex scene where the fingers touch.
Yes.
Hey, that's pretty hot
for
a Star Wars movie.
He also spoke about the tension that runs through the whole movie between Rey and Kylo Ren. It seems pretty obvious that he was going to say sexual, but then stopped himself just in time and settled for romantic.
And there's that sort of tension, that romantic tension.
Because I think, yeah, it is romantic. And it is a bit sexual as well. It's something that's often played off as an absurd, incorrect take, just fangirl rubbish. But it's not. I understand if you don't like the two of them together, but to say that there's no evidence of it is just kind of silly. I personally see it as an unapologetically romantic portrayal of two soulmates, seemingly separated by so many surface level things, but connected on such a pure emotional and spiritual level. Look at the way they look at each other and tell me they're not in love. Here's Kelly Marie Tran saying something similar.
How do you feel about Kylo Ren and Rey?
Reylo,
yes. Yeah. Are you shipping them?
I really, really like what Ryan has done with these characters in terms of their relationship and the idea that they're two sort of lone figures on obviously opposite sides, but they are kind of going through this parallel experience.
The romance is supported by practically everyone who brought the characters and their story to life. It was nearly hinted at heavier in the movie. Luke was initially going to say that Rey opened herself up to the dark side for a pair of pretty eyes, but Ryan cut it, probably because he knew fans were just going to swap eyes for tits. While we're on fans, let's talk about the aftermath of this film's release. The people who had been on the Reylo train since 2015 were obviously over the moon, and suddenly millions of people were getting on that train. It went a lot more mainstream. Star Wars Twitter did a poll of favourite ships from The Last Jedi and specified that you couldn't say Rey and Kylo. It was being officially acknowledged. But just as it became more talked about, it became more criticised. The new movie brought loads of new talking points for all the same arguments. Again, I'll speak about these in a bit more detail after Rise of Skywalker, but the conversation surrounding Reylo just got messier and messier. And just as Disney seemed to quickly lose faith in The Last Jedi following all the bullshit it caused people to spout, I think they became ashamed of Reylo. They didn't tap into that huge subset of the fandom. I know they didn't want to jump the gun and give everything away before the last movie, but still, it doesn't seem like it's just that. There wasn't much merch or official artwork. When it came time for episode 9, there were no photo shoots with Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley together. Marketing-wise, it seemed like a huge missed opportunity. I guess it's their loss. The fans made their own content, and boy was there an explosion of content. With so many people more on board with the ship, there was so much more fanfiction, artwork, edits, both in obscure fandom spaces and in the more mainstream. College Humor did a parody of the song Shallow that was about Rey and Kylo Ren, and it's just outstanding. High quality in every way. And the comments section is just full of 2019 positivity about the two of them as a romantic pairing. But there was still the big question of how it was going to end, whether Kylo Ren would be the big villain of episode 9 or whether he would be redeemed, and whether Reylo was something they were even going to touch after years of controversy and silence, and the trailer didn't answer those questions. It starts with Rey looking just as she did in The Force Awakens, stood in a desert just as she did in The Force Awakens, holding the saber she used in The Force Awakens, the same one whose destruction was a poignant moment of progress in the previous movie. Oh, and there's Kylo reforging his helmet from The Force Awakens. JJ's mate designed the helmet and got really sad when it got destroyed, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Even JJ knew that for actual important emotional scenes, the helmet had to go. We needed to see his face. But Michael Kaplan is a petty weirdo who doesn't understand that the mask should serve the story. That's what the point of the mask is. It doesn't matter that he worked hard on it, but it was back. Oh, and remember when they killed Snoke and made sure that we were in brand new territory because it was impossible to copy Return of the Jedi for this finale, on account of the fact there was no Palpatine figure? Well, the longest scene in the trailer is Rey running from a special TIE fighter, and people made fun of this. Why not run sideways? Why isn't it shooting her? And also, if it was Kylo Ren, had they not moved past trying to murder one another? I said we shouldn't judge until we had context. The logical explanation was that it was someone else, or he wasn't trying to kill her. It was Rey and Kylo Ren training for something. How adorably naive we were. The trailers showed a few other things. There was speculation that Dark Rey was Rey after joining Ben Solo on the dark side, one of the few indications that we'd get any real Reylo content. And then in the sea of red flags, there was one line that got Reylo fans very excited.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
I do.
It was a time of heavy anticipation and apprehension. We just had to wait and see what movie we'd end up with. And I did not like the movie we ended up with. A lot of people didn't. I'll be honest, the biggest hurdle I faced while making this video was the fact I didn't really want to watch The Rise of Skywalker again. But I did, and here's what I think about it from a Reylo standpoint. If I get things wrong about the details of the plot, please go easy on me. I'm trying my best to make sense of it, and that means I'm trying infinitely harder than the people who made this movie. Fitting with the idea that Kylo Ren is half of the main protagonist, the film opens with him on a mission, trying desperately to figure out what's going on with the Emperor, won't we all? As soon as he meets Palpatine, he becomes his second. So really we get about 2 minutes of Supreme Leader Kylo Ren in this film, and that's a bit of a shame, that killing Snoke had so few consequences. I hate that Palpatine is even in this movie. I'm all for Reylo uniting against a common enemy, but it didn't have to be this guy. They had that Weasley little prick right there that they both had beef with. But no, Sheev gives Kylo the task of killing Rey, and then we get their first interaction through the Force, where he touches Vader's helmet and makes her bad at training, or wants to find her. It's a bit of a theme in Rise of Skywalker. Things happen through the Force that are a bit too complicated to be conveyed visually, so I don't really know what's meant to be happening. Whatever that was, we then get some stuff happening, and then we finally get their first proper Force connection when she gets to Pisana. Interestingly, in this one, there is more of a flashy effect going on when they have these, and just as Ryan said, the intimacy is suddenly gone. The focus is more on, ooh, woo, look how mysterious the Force is, than their conversation. And I know they didn't end things on great terms in The Last Jedi, but this initial conversation just feels off to me. They're speaking in these weird long phrases that make it seem less like dialogue and more like a series of quotes.
I see through the cracks in your mask. You're haunted. You can't stop saying what you did to your father.
Do you still count the days since your parents left?
The movie kind of returns their relationship to how it was in The Force Awakens, just as their costumes have been sent back to how they were then. Like, I just think they should be way past Rey mentioning Han. We do get some acknowledgement of the previous movie though, which almost makes it weirder. They discuss Rey not taking Kylo's hand. He says he knows she wanted to and that she'll take it next time. In fact, his exact words are, "I'm gonna turn you to the dark side," which is laughable. Then we don't see them together for a while. There's a slightly notable moment where she finds an angry creature living in the darkness, and instead of fighting him, she sees that he's wounded and chooses to help him heal. I may not like this movie, but that symbolism is nice, it's not lost on me. Then we get to the weird bit from the trailer where he's trying to run her over. It's not a training sequence, we gave it way too much credit. It really was just a strange moment of Kylo Ren trying to slam into her with his ship. She takes the ship down and then the majestic helmetless prince shows up and looks fucking glorious. This scene alone should have made them go, what the hell are we doing covering this guy back up? They have another, less visually interesting Force tug of war, which is weird because we already know that they're completely evenly matched, but it does force her to use her zappy fingies and makes her think she's killed Chewbacca. And then they just fly off and Kylo lets them go. It's strange. On the ship, Rey tells Finn that she's had a sex dream, or she calls it a force vision, but it's about her and Kylo Ren sat together on the Sith throne. Ooh la la. The next time she connects with him, she's in his bedroom. He starts explaining the plot of Rise of Skywalker to her, and she fights him in an understandable effort to stop the Rey Palpatine reveal from happening. She's bringing all of the aggression in this one. Ben doesn't want to kill her, and we find out why. He tells her she's a Palpatine, and what the Emperor doesn't know is that they're a dyad in the Force. He says his real plan is to team up with Rey to kill Palpatine and sit on that big Sith chair together. But it's not as raw a plea as is one from The Last Jedi. There's much less emotion, it feels like a step backwards. Maybe that comes from the fact Adam Driver is in a mask, gesturing along to dialogue he wouldn't say until he re-recorded his lines in a hotel cupboard weeks before the film's release. Whatever the reason, it reminds me of the generic and hollow join me's of the previous trilogies. Rey escapes and tells Finn she wants revenge against Palpatine for the death of her parents. She says that people keep telling her they know her, but that no one does. And there's no beautiful large man to show up and tell her that he does. The trailer lied. Rey heads to the Death Star to get a map holocron thing, has a vision that she's wearing cool black robes, then Kylo Ren shows up. He stomps on the Wayfinder, then transforms his foot into a hand and crushes it, so that Rey has to go to Exegol with him. And given that his ship only fits one person, we're at a surprising second occasion in this film where the two of them are hypothetically having to share a seat. It's the classic, there's only one bed fanfiction trope. I'm not judging. For Ryan it was hands, for JJ it must be chairs. He says she can never go back to Leia, just like he can't, which is weird because she hasn't actually done anything. He's wrong about her and he's wrong about himself, but he never finds out that he's wrong about himself. Then they fight, although I'm not quite sure to what end. Neither of them want to kill the other. It seems like a real waste of time. Then Princess Leia does something that distracts Ben long enough for Rey to land the killing blow, but I don't think that was Leia's intention. I think she was trying to make him a goodie. It's another weird, vague Force scene and I don't like it. But it snaps Rey out of her rage and she heals the man she just murdered. And here is one of the first scenes between these two in this film that actually works. They finally get another moment of intimacy, and she says she did want to take his hands, but not Kylo Ren's, Ben's. Then Harrison Ford shows up for the best scene in the whole movie. He says that Kylo Ren is dead, but Ben Solo is alive, and he tells him to come home, once again reminding us that he could come home. It's not too late. And then we don't see Ben for over 20 minutes. In that time, we find out that Leia trained as a Jedi, but decided to abandon that path when she sensed the death of her son at the end of it. Well, it's a good thing she stopped that from happening. Then a whole load of plot happens, and Rey is confronting Palpatine, and all hope seems lost. Palpatine tells Rey that Luke was saved by his father, but Rey doesn't have any family except him, and that no one is coming to save her. Then we get another scene that is just undeniably great.
Here comes the boy. Hello. Welcome.
Ben Solo is back, baby, and he is spectacular. He says ow, he's funny, he shoots backwards like his dad. Adam Driver brings so much personality and life to this character. We see a huge difference with only small visual changes. He is unfortunately lightsaberless though, so his old mates start hitting him. Then we get a fantastic twist on Snoke's death. Palpatine is narrating exactly what Rey will do, striking him down and absorbing his power and spirit. She lifts the lightsaber up and actually passes it to Ben through the Force. They share just a beautiful silent moment in their Force connection. Rey is just showing a gorgeous mixture of surprise, relief, and joy that Ben has come to fight with her on the side of the light. And you know what? There's a bit of love in her eyes as well. As for Ben, he is so undeniably good in this scene. You see it in his eyes. Kylo Ren is gone. We see a side of Ben Solo that we've never seen before. A playful shrug when he pulls the lightsaber out of thin air. Han's son is alive. He has purpose and, most importantly, hope. Then Rey and Ben share another beautiful silent moment not through the Force, facing one another. These two contrasting characters, light and dark, Skywalker and Palpatine, they stand side by side and raise their blue lightsabers. But we're not allowed to have nice things. JJ must have noticed that he hadn't dropped the ball in a while, so he made one of the stupidest choices he could have, and made it so that this act of redemption, hope, and defiant love in the face of hate was not what brought an end to Palpatine. No, that would be too poetic and good. For some reason, it becomes part of his bullshit plan. He says that their dyadness makes them a power like life itself, and it heals him, makes him an ultra super baddie. So like 5 minutes after his triumphant return to the light, Ben Solo is just chucked down a hole, and he stays there for the rest of the movie's climax. Despite being referred to by both Ryan and JJ as the second half of the main protagonist, he's just gone. Rey's ultimate victory against Palpatine isn't really one of compassion or hope, and it's not really brought about by the faith she put in Ben Solo. He doesn't really matter. It's just that she's able to use 2 lightsabers and murder Palpatine quicker than he can murder her. There's a bit of an element of resilience with her rising up with the help of all the Jedi, but come on now, it's a bit naff. To me, the obvious way round to do this is the initial failure being brought about by violence and anger, and then the solution is the surprise pairing of Rey and Kylo Ren. Bringing them together just to empower the devil is just baffling. They fail together, but she succeeds on her own. That's just backwards. And it turns out her success wasn't enough. She holds the lightsabers a bit too hard and she dies, abandoned by the spirits of all the Jedi that were meant to give her strength. Then Ben Solo is allowed to be in this movie again because it's practically over. He doesn't hesitate to hold her in his arms. I think he's initially mourning her, and then he realizes what he has to do, and brings her back to life. She puts her hand on his, sits up, and she kisses him, and he kisses her. It's romantic and hopeful and triumphant. They smile at each other, looking genuinely happier than we've seen either of them the whole trilogy. And then Ben just straight up dies. The power of the dyad that was supposedly strong enough to act like life itself was somehow not good enough for Ben to heal Rey and stay alive. Now look at how Rey's face falls when she realizes she can't keep him in her life, and tell me this was meant to be a happy ending. It's absolutely devastating. For her, for the audience, and for anyone who cares about redemption. Also, it feels like the most boring thing you can do with a redeemed character. Surely it would have been more interesting to see how Ben Solo would fit back into the galaxy after years of being Kylo Ren. He would have been accepted by Rey, and Rey's friends trust her enough that they might have too. Let's not forget they willingly worked with Hux, and accepted Rey when they thought she'd kill Chewbacca. Ben joining the crew would have been awkward, it would have been funny, it would have been something. The whole trilogy he's told by characters that it's not too late to come home, but he never does. He never has a reunion with his mother, or any scene with her at all. There was so much potential, and him dying breaks my heart. But to my surprise, Rey gets over the loss pretty quickly. She seems completely unaffected when she flies off, especially compared to how she looks before then. It's almost as if it's actually just an alternate take of her landing, with added CGI dirt and wounds to make it seem later in the film. But suggesting that makes me sound like an insane conspiracy theorist. So why don't I just show you that it's literally what happened? Obviously, I think Ben Solo should have lived, and I do have to wonder whether there's a version of this movie somewhere where he does. Maz Kanata smiling when Leia fades away, Ben's complete lack of post-redemption dialogue, Adam Driver on the Rebel base set. They also missed the opportunity to have an X-Wing and a TIE fighter flying off into the sunset together, or the two of them sharing one ship, as I know JJ's into that. And while we're talking about that, George Lucas once said that if the boy and the girl walk off into the sunset together in the last scene, it adds 10 million to the box office. The man knows we love love. Episode 9 writer Chris Terrio says he thinks George Lucas would be the first to say that a fairy tale ending would be a naive way to think, but that is literally untrue. He has referred to Star Wars as a fairy tale multiple times and is unashamed of the simplicity of those conventions. Happily Ever After is a great way to leave a movie and a trilogy, but we don't get that. Rey ends the movie on her own, and we don't have any indication of what comes next for her, for the Jedi or for the galaxy. We see a new Star Destroyer crashing into the graveyard of giants on Jakku, and it just seems like the cycle of violence is just going to continue forever.
They blow you up today, you blow them up tomorrow. It's just business. You're wrong.
The next one actually proves me right. For me, the best thing they could have done is show Rey and Ben forging a new path for the Jedi, starting a new order, being in love, showing what happens in a Star Wars redemption story when the character being redeemed doesn't just die immediately. But we don't get any of that. We don't even see Ben's ghost. And honestly, if they were so happy to quite literally toss him aside, why have him kiss Rey? It's a bizarre moment in the context of the rest of the movie. I don't understand people who say the kiss came out of nowhere, because it obviously did not. But it is strange when it's preceded by the movie resetting their relationship, and there's clearly no intention of continuing after it. it. There's no commentary for this film, so Marianne Brandon, the film's editor, has given us the best insight we have into JJ's rationalization. Her thoughts were this: I always said the movie will tell us whether they should kiss or not. We will know by the time we get to the end of our process if it should happen. And I felt it should, and JJ agreed with me, and other people who saw the film agreed. The fact they detached the romance element from the rest of the story and had it as part of a last-minute decision explains the weirdness. Still, I'm glad they kissed. The full canonization of Reylo is a victory, and it took the ship into the undeniable mainstream. The kiss even showed up in the Oscars the next year. It makes me glad we got Rise of Skywalker instead of Colin Trevorrow's script. That one paired Rey with Poe, a character she'd literally never spoken to. So I count myself lucky we got a Reylo kiss. And let's remind ourselves of what a kiss really means in the world of PG-13 Star Wars movies.
What he wants is to kiss her. And a kiss in this film is almost equivalent to intercourse. Not to the children, but to the adults. I think.
So that's good, but they still went about this canonization in a really half-baked way. I think Rise of Skywalker tried to satisfy everyone, sequel fans and sequel haters alike, and it ended up satisfying very few. The Reylos technically won, but at what cost? The death of Ben Solo at the moment he solidified his redemption let a lot of people down, and it dampened their interest in the future of the series. We got to see a Reylo kiss, but then it was over, and despite it now being completely inarguably canon, Lucasfilm continued to ignore the large Reylo fandom. I mean, there's been very little sequel content in general, but especially stuff with Rey and Ben Solo. And that's possibly because they're ashamed of it. Even the Rise of Skywalker novelization seemingly chucked a bone to the people who were critical of Reylo and its fans by calling the kiss a kiss of gratitude. Shut the fuck up, man. And let's talk about the Reylo fans. I see so many generalizations thrown around about them. Some have this misogynistic idea that they're all just silly women trying to bring romance into a story that doesn't need it. There's also the idea that everyone who ships it is toxic, which is ridiculous. There have obviously been times where members of the community have gone too far, doing awful things, but it's far, far from all of them. There is an intensity to the devotion of the fandom that is pretty widespread. I think that's come from the fact they've had to be on the defensive from the very beginning, so they're dedicated. But to say that the majority are obsessed crazy people shows a real misunderstanding of how huge the group actually is. It is constantly underestimated size-wise. On the fanfiction site Archive of Our Own, it is one of the most popular pairings of characters for people to write and read about. Not just out of Star Wars ships, but all of them. Whenever there's new official merch featuring Rey or Ben, or just Ben, it sells out immediately without fail. I know people who've said, oh, but I don't know anyone who wanted Reylo. Okay, what do you want me to do about it? Get you better friends? I do think this is partially a product of how insular the fandom can be. Unlike other subsets of the wider Star Wars fandom, the Reylo community feels very much like a separate entity. Perhaps the reason you don't see anyone expressing positive opinions for the ship is because most of them have been made to feel unwelcome by the rest of the Star Wars fans. You'll only hear about the most extreme cases that happen outside of specific Reylo fandom spaces, and assume that's everyone. There are loads of people who like the ship, but don't want to openly publicly say it online. And I don't think the separation is always a problem. There are more than enough members to support it as a self-sufficient fandom content-wise, with everything from cosplay photo shoots to Battlefront mods. But it's definitely a shame that it's had to happen. And it's a shame that it's led to an inaccurate reputation, because what I see is just a bunch of passionate people who love a specific aspect of Star Wars and want to celebrate it. And the abuse and ridicule that they receive for doing it is unbelievable and exhausting. I have a number of friends in the Reylo community. To be honest, at this point I feel like I'm in the Reylo community, and if you think that makes me biased, then you're free to think that, but I think it actually gives me a little bit of authority to speak on this, because I've seen firsthand the toxicity, the shaming, and the harassment that's thrown at literally anyone who expresses a pro-Reylo opinion, which is absurd considering that there are multiple Star Wars movies and creators that express pro-Reylo opinions. There's a constant battle to just like this thing on the internet, and the fight comes from all over. Obviously, we have the Fandom Menace, the cartoon baddies of the Star Wars fandom, just laughably evil in every way. They're the most clear cut about their Reylo hate. They're just angry little boys who are upset that girls like their thing. Romance is icky and definitely not something that Star Wars would ever be about. Some maybe don't match all of the Fandom Menace stereotypes, but there's a sentiment of haha, Reylo bad, go back to Twilight, that ends up in a lot of prequel and Clone Wars and original trilogy spaces. And when you chuck in the fact that the Reylo fandom is full of people of colour and those in the LGBTQ+ community, there is an intense but unfortunately predictable level of hostility there from those worried about the infiltration of precious dude bro fan spaces. But what makes this worse is the silence from a lot of members of the Star Wars fandom when it comes to sticking up for the Reylos. It's like Britta, they can excuse doxing and harassment but draw the line at wanting two fictional characters to smooch. Because on the side of the fandom that is supposedly the goodies, you've got the anti-Reylo crowd. Antis dedicate a lot of their time and personality to arguing with Reylo fans against the idea of Reylo. People become anti-shippers for a number of reasons. Let's have a look at these reasons and see why most of them are completely idiotic. Let's start with the one I have the most sympathy for, and that's to do with Finn. There's a lot of anger for the treatment of Finn's character in the sequel trilogy. He was marketed as the lead, he only had half an arc in The Force Awakens, meaning The Last Jedi had to pick up the slack and complete his first movie arc in the second, and then Rise of Skywalker did absolutely nothing with him. I empathise with this anger, and share it, but I think directing it towards Reylo's or Ben Solo as a character is a mistake. Finn wasn't sidelined to make room for Ben Solo. Ben Solo is the grandson of Anakin Skywalker, the child of Han and Leia. He was always going to play a major role. Finn did not have to be sidelined for that to be the case. They're not mutually exclusive. Finn could have and should have had a better role within the story alongside the Reylo subplot. There are a lot more people who deserve the blame here. Some people are anti-Reylo because they want Rey and Finn or Rey and Poe to get together, and that's fine I guess, as long as they're not horrible about it. I saw someone on TikTok who was angry about Reylo existing purely because Finn and Poe did not. And again, that just seems like very misplaced anger. Some people just hate it because they don't think Adam Driver is attractive, which again is fine as long as it doesn't bring out this weird level of hostility. You get people who will swear it's not a canon couple, even though we all saw them smooch and I think they were both pretty into it. That kiss of gratitude thing gives them a better argument than they should have though. Some go to the lengths of claiming they can't be in love because they're related, because a Darth Vader comic seemed to show Palpatine creating Anakin, a moment that pretty much everyone has pointed out is from a dark side vision, and the dark side is probably not the most reliable narrator, but it gives these people ammo. There's also the issue of toxic positivity, people who will swear literally all of Star Wars is good, and criticizing it makes you less of a fan. You see these people pop up whenever disappointment is expressed about Ben's death, or Rise of Skywalker in general. When Reylos bring up the world between worlds, this vague force plane that has only ever had one appearance in Rebels, everyone else is suddenly an expert in how it works, and explains why it could never be used to reverse Ben's death, and that it shouldn't be because Ben's death is actually perfect. There's nothing wrong with liking that movie, there's nothing wrong with hating it, but I see so many bad faith arguments that just piss me off. Another argument is that Rey is a strong enough character that she doesn't need a love interest, and I just can't wrap my head around that one. I know it's reactionary, a necessary response to years of female characters being saved by the handsome prince, but I think there's an overcompensation that's taken place, not in a stupid meathead, feminism has gone too far kind of way, but just that years of BuzzFeed articles and Tumblr posts have led to a generation of female characters showing their strength and independence by living and dying on their own. It's not anti-feminist to show someone falling in love. Romance is not automatically problematic, and wanting Rey to be happy in love while also remaining powerful and independent is not some archaic mindset that will set humanity back. There seems to almost be a desperation to see her as a victim or a child. Part of the reason I can't stand Rey Skywalker is because the idea of Rey being this adopted orphan taken in by the kindly incestuous Skywalker couple just doesn't line up with how I see her and what she's after in life. She's an adult woman. The belonging that she sought, that Maz said was ahead of her, should have come from adult relationships rather than just new dead parents. But I guess that's a topic for another video. There's an attitude from a lot of men of just, oh you silly foolish women, oh don't you know that Kylo Ren is mean? He's a baddie. You don't want a guy like him, you just think you do. What you really need is a nice guy, like me, which is a big red flag and an argument that pops up anytime a dark, brooding character develops a following. It often goes hand in hand with blatantly misogynistic takes that claim all fans of this pairing are just stupid women who can't see beyond Kylo Ren's dashing good looks. It's funny that on one side you've got people saying Adam Driver is too ugly for the ship to be good, and on the other you've got people saying that his gorgeousness is blinding all the women from true reason. Also, I'm gonna take offense on behalf of all the non-women who find Ben Solo attractive, because we're often erased from the narrative for the sake of boring sexism. If you're gonna be a patronizing prick, at least do it with a level of intersectionality. There's an official Star Wars comic that seems to echo this icky sentiment. It features this woman becoming romantically obsessed with Darth Vader. So much of what she says and does is lifted straight from stale fangirl stereotypes, and it ends with Vader killing her with an almost let that be a lesson to you at home kind of tone, which you see all over the internet. These people treat shippers like they're completely incapable of separating fiction from reality, and as I said before, I think they're the ones who suffer from that the most. You see posts like this. I just want to point out that characters can be unlikable and messy and make horrible choices and learn and grow from their mistakes is totally different than having a space fascist murder his dad and attempt to murder his mother, but it's all okay because he's hot and loves one girl. I think if you're posting this take, you're operating on the assumption that everyone is as shallow as you. I also think there's a complete textual misunderstanding that's gone on, either deliberate or otherwise. People frame the Ben Solo redemption narrative as Ben going good to please the girl, to get some kind of reward. I'm all for having your own interpretation, but that seems like a straight up lie. That's not what the movies show. She helps him onto the path he was already meant to be on, and he turned good in that moment without any witness or reward. I think Adam Driver puts it best.
He has to let her know that they're together. but I don't know that he entirely is sure what's going to happen from there. Nor do I think he cares. I think it's so long as he's with her, he's on the right path.
He doesn't know what's going to happen afterwards, and he doesn't care. That's quite hard to frame as him just trying to please Rey so he gets a kiss on the lips. There's this fandom policing that takes place whenever someone shows a love for a villain. No, you can't do that. No, they've killed people. He is not a soft boy. He's not a poor little meow meow. When, come on now, we all know that is exactly what he is. Yeah, but you wouldn't have a crush on Kylo Ren if he killed your loved ones, and to that I will always be grateful for this post, which argues against that stupid point far better than I ever could. It says, I don't know about you, but existing in the real world gives me and my loved ones immunity from the actions of fictional villains. Hope you managed to get your family out of Star Wars. But Joe, you may be saying, you must be aware of the real world consequences of this kind of villain rehabilitation. And I am. I'm aware that there are very few. If you're not in the know, I am incredibly jealous, but there's this absurd idea that the popularity of characters like Kylo Ren has contributed to a rise in far-right extremism. It's a moral panic that is a bizarre mixture of clutching at pearls and grasping at straws. Some think the far-right will see these movies and their responses and think Kylo Ren is a Nazi. If he can be accepted and found attractive, so can I. Which is such a naive mindset. It's one that a lot of people in the US seem to have. The idea that people on the right watch movies and see themselves as the bad guy, when they absolutely do not. They think the woke are the Empire, and Ben Shapiro is Luke Skywalker, flying his InfoWars X-Wing to blow up the cancel culture Death Star with free speech, facts and logic. He's used that metaphor before when talking about the firing of Lucasfilm's most prominent moron, Gina Carano. And is it even fair to call Kylo Ren a Nazi? The First Order have visual similarities with Germany in the 1930s. The aesthetic is comparable, but is the ideology? We don't really know. We don't know anything about their ideology beyond just being a generic evil military force. The Empire was used in Return of the Jedi as a metaphor for the United States in the Vietnam War. Palpatine has been an allegory for Nixon, Cheney, Bush, but I'm not sure he's ever been Hitler. And as for the actual members of the First Order, most people are not there by choice. They were just children taken from their homes and brainwashed. They are victims, and to write them all off feels silly. Ben Solo is no exception. He was groomed and brainwashed by a powerful manipulator from a young age. Everyone seems to be on that page with Anakin. George Lucas himself said, I like the idea of the person you thought of as the villain really being the victim, and that the story is really about the villain trying to regain his humanity. But that's not something that's accepted about Kylo Ren. I feel like these people know that they don't have a leg to stand on, because they further their points by just lying about what happens in the movie. This tweet claims he blew up all of those planets, when if you look closely, it's actually a man called General Hux. There are a few visual differences that give it away. And if you point out that he didn't have anything to do with Starkiller Base, they just lie and say things like this. At least Vader was like, this Death Star thing ain't my cup of tea. But Kylo was like, no, I think Starkiller Base is funky fresh. For starters, Kylo didn't say that. But also, Vader was only upset with the Death Star because everyone was hyping it up too much and forgetting that the Force was way cooler. He didn't care about the planet exploding. I've always got the sense that Vader and Kylo operate outside of the political realm. They're not wrapped up in the ideology of their institutions, they're part of the special dark side wing. So no, Kylo Ren is not a Nazi, and his portrayal, redemption and romance arc isn't going to inspire Nazis to be bigger Nazis. But this anger at Reylo is not just because of the supposed direct empowerment of fascists, it's also about the complacency that it develops towards the rise of fascism, and I cannot express enough how much this is not a thing. It was a straw man concept that was thrown out and inexplicably taken seriously. I saw someone on Twitter speaking about how they related to Ben Solo's story, to the trauma and abuse that he'd suffered, and you just had people piling on them for sympathising and admitting they relate to a Nazi, dismissing and mocking their trauma in the process. But this was far from an isolated incident. People bully and antagonise Reylo and Ben Solo fans like they're on some kind of crusade for social justice, because I think they've got it into their heads that they are. Star Wars author E.K. Johnston implied that the merchandising and fun that the series was having with Kylo Ren and Vader had led to a casual and unconcerned view of rising fascism. Jesus Christ. And again, she's far from the only one. It's not real. It's Star Wars. Having a cute Kylo Ren story for kids isn't going to make them go, the alt-right aren't so bad, are they? I don't know if these people genuinely believe anything they say or if it's just a way of shaming fans that are different to themselves. I don't know which one I'd prefer, but it's unbelievable. Relating to Ben Solo does not make you a white supremacist. As Rian Johnson said, we relate to characters because they reflect our inner experience in a heightened way. And sympathising with him does not mean you no longer care about fascism. And honestly, a group of predominantly white American liberals giving lectures about complacency in the face of rising fascism is the very definition of the pot calling the kettle black, or whatever they say in Star Wars.
All of that isn't the quack calling the stifling slimy.
So to anyone taking this approach to discredit, belittle, and shame fans of Ben Solo and his relationship with Rey, just drop the act and stop pretending you're fighting the good fight. Because if those were really your intentions, you would have found much better targets than just Star Wars fans sharing fan art. Either own up to being good old-fashioned bullies, or go argue with some actual fucking fascists. Because right now, it seems like you only care about them when they're fictional. Sorry, it's just frustrating the amount of misplaced anger that always finds its way to people who just want Rey and Kylo Ren to smooch. There's this narrative that the Reylos and the Fandom Menace are just two sides of the same coin, and it makes me angry. The idea that both are as extreme and unhealthy as each other. I guess the horseshoe theory of the meta. You see the same comparisons made in the Doctor Who world. People equating the #NotMyDoctor crowd with the 13th Doctor fans. And honestly, fuck off. When one side is fueled by bigotry and the other fueled by love, going, you're really just as bad as each other is fucking absurd. Like I said, there have been times when members of the Reylo community have been bad, but while only a small percentage of the fandom fits this stereotype, pretty much all of them have faced abuse for it. I think people who sit on the outside of this discourse, and all discourse, have a tendency to brush it aside. It's about a silly space movie, so it must be silly. I've been guilty of this in the past, but I think just because the subject matter is trivial doesn't mean that all the online interaction surrounding it is. There are real, genuine consequences to this stuff that takes place online. Hacking, harassment, doxing, and death threats are incredibly serious, even when it's rooted in something as unimportant as Star Wars or Doctor Who opinions. So I've made an effort to not do what others have and diminish this type of thing as petty internet drama. So where are we now? 2 years after Rise of Skywalker, I think the dust has kind of settled. There are still those dedicated to bringing up these stagnant 2016 takes every few weeks, but I think it's easier for people to just ignore it, which may be a good thing, but it also may just be because there's no new content. As for the Reylos, they're still going relatively hard for the ship. Every time I think things may be dying down, I'm reminded of this fandom's durability. Like recently, Rock Love Jewelry released necklaces based on Kylo Ren and Rey's lightsabers, and did a Reylo-inspired photo shoot for it. And wowee, it set the internet on fire. It was like 2017 again, seeing it everywhere, and it further displays the untapped Reylo potential for future stories. Whenever there's a crumb, it's eaten up so excitedly, like when Rey and Ben briefly interacted in the LEGO Star Wars Holiday Special. But I do wonder how long this fandom has left without any new material. Will it spend the next few decades focusing on 3 movies, one of which makes them sad? We'll have to wait and see. I think lots will. They're dedicated and enjoy the community. But it's also likely that many will find franchises that aren't ashamed to embrace this side of fandom, and they'll leave behind this crusty old series that is only able to cater to one specific type of fan. Loki springs to mind. The similarities between Reylo and Silky were not lost on people, and it seems like this show is heading in a direction that people will find a lot more favourable. So I guess Star Wars will have to adapt, or it will lose this established audience. On a personal level, rewatching these films and diving back into these two characters and their relationship has really just made me miss them. I love the dynamic, I love the story, I love the romance. I just hate that it ended in a way that was just so devoid of hope. I think it would be a real tragedy if we never saw these two in Star Wars again. It's a real missed opportunity to close the door on that. I have never felt this attached to a Star Wars pairing before. Not Han and Leia, not Anakin and Padme, and as much as I loved them, not Kanan and Hera. There's something so raw about this connection. It drives so much of these films. The chemistry between the actors is electric. They're so beautiful and so beautiful together. There's a shared experience that helps them understand each other better than anyone else could, and they're two characters that really deserve a better life than the one they've ended up with. And they learn, and we learn, that that's possible through a life together. And I wish we could see that, and I don't blame the thousands of fanfiction writers who've made that a reality for themselves. I have a real appreciation for the Reylo community, not just for their excellent taste, but for the talent and creativity they've shown in the face of hostility, and in the face of, let's face it, rejection by Star Wars as a whole. Does some of them need to chill? Sure. Does literally everyone need to chill about this subject? Absolutely. Does Lucasfilm need to release a movie or Disney Plus show where Ben is brought back to life? Undoubtedly. No one stays dead in Star Wars. We've had Darth Maul and Boba Fett and Palpatine return from the grave. Why not let us truly meet Ben Solo? He deserves to marry Rey, ride off into the sunset, and live happily ever after. And the people deserve to see it. They are the best couple in all of Star Wars, and it's not even close. And I hope now you know why. Thank you for watching this video. I didn't expect it to be so long, but I thought I'd commit to really covering this topic. If you were already a Reylo, I hope you found some enjoyment in this. I feel that we've all just been poring over the same amount of content for such a long time that pretty much every take and opinion has already been expressed. But these were my thoughts, and I've not seen many pro-Reylo opinions expressed on YouTube, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to explain how I feel. And it's something people have asked my opinion of, because what the internet really needs is more white men giving their Star Wars opinions. If you were undecided or indifferent towards Reylo, Reylo, maybe rewatch the films from this new angle. And if you're still not on board, I hope I've at least provided an explanation on why so many people are. I appreciate that you've watched this far, and maybe you'll see this ship and this community in a slightly different light. If you were against the pairing then and against it now, I doubt you're still watching. I'm not going to change your mind. However you feel, just don't be a dick. If someone is talking about how they like something, don't dive in to explain why they're wrong or stupid. And to be honest, the same goes for when they don't like something, although sometimes it can be fun to dunk on really stupid arguments, as I've done today. In this case, I'm welcoming discussion. Tell me how wrong I am, tell me how right I am, just let me know what your thoughts are on Reylo and your experiences with these characters and this world. Let's try and keep it civil, but I know how passionate we all are about this. If you've gotten anything out of this video, consider subscribing. I talk about Star Wars, I talk about other things. Usually my videos are a lot shorter. Follow me on Twitter as well for takes that are too small to be their own video but too mildly entertaining to go unpublished. Check out my Patreon, my Discord, my Letterboxd. I'm starting university again soon, so that may slightly impact my upload schedule, but we'll see. The next video will come out when it comes out. Until then, love you lots.